This field is an internal string. So like there's a meaning of the paper. Like there's this. This name.
Can I get started or
Yeah.
a couple minutes in?
This does.
Get going through the
This is like
no file and
compression is not this part.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Let's get started. So this is the second session on the week. This is the WebTransport session at IETF 124. The session is being recorded. Please make sure to sign into the Meet Echo session using the QR code or the data tracker agenda. You can use the hand icon to join the queue, and please use the microphone or the video camera icon if you're remote so that we can hear you. So this is the new IETF Notewell. This is only the second session of the meeting, so if you haven't had a chance to take a look, please do so now. And please note that we operate under a code of conduct. So if you have any concerns, please feel free to talk to the chairs, the responsible ADs, or the ombuds team. We also have a note regarding the IPR disclosure, so please let us know if you're aware of anything there. And yeah, here's the links to the agenda and the notes. I just want to take a moment to say David has stepped down as chair, as you might have noticed. And so I just want to say thank you so much to him for all his energy and work he did to bring this work forward. And yeah. So we've already gotten 2 volunteers for the note takers. Thank you, Akshay and Hani. And here's the agenda. Would anyone like to bash the agenda? No? Okay. So is Will in the meeting? Is he here?
I am here, but Yanivar is going to present the W3C and he's online.
Oh, okay, cool. Let me hand it off to you. Do you want us to control the slides, or would you like slide control?
If someone could drive the slides, that works for me.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. So yes, we give a regular update of developments in the W3C for WebTransport. And this is our update on progress since July 23rd, which was our last update. So our latest published working draft is dated 22nd of October. And our current charter runs until the end of the year. So we'll probably need to renew based on the current timetable, which we are pushing in front of us a little bit. We're working really hard to get to candidate recommendation. This requires stability in API. And following that, we'll see how that goes. So basically, our milestone candidate status is for candidate recommendation, wide review. We are 90% complete. We have 8 open issues, but they're all ready for PR. So there are no more open issues being discussed, except one that we're mentioning later today. So we have 74 closed issues. Next slide, please. Some major decisions and updates since our last report. This was came in right before our last report, but didn't make it to the slides. So it's worth calling out here that datagram readables are no longer byte streams by default. And this was because to preserve datagram semantics, datagrams can actually be empty, and they basically still exist. They're not just a concatenation of bytes. And so that could conflict with the bring your own buffer reader in the stream spec. So byte streams are now optional, which means there's a new constructor argument that you can specifically say that you want to operate with byte. But by default, there are no longer byte streams, which has the benefit that you can receive empty datagrams and not have errors or absence. And also we added an RFC link to the min RTT stat, which was missing a definition. So now the exposed min RTT statistic is as defined by RFC 9002, section 5.2. We also added, we have a new explainer for sub-protocol negotiation. Thanks, Victor. And we also have, this one's not merged yet, but we're trying hard to integrate with fetch as PR 697. So if you have comments on that, please give feedback. I almost had another slide on this, but it's worth mentioning that some things that we thought we'd get for free by integrating with fetch, such as headers, which we'll talk about, I have some questions around, because it sounds like this group might be a good group to ask. For instance, we have protocol node, which works similarly to WebSockets, but that did not fall out for free just because we integrated with fetch. We still had to do our own work. For instance, in WebSocket, I believe the protocols is handled, a lot of the mechanics of the spec is handled by fetch. But in our first integrations with fetch here, we still have to deal with fetch doing the session establishment for WebTransport. So that was not free. So a question later will be, how, when we say we want headers, what do we mean? But we'll come back to that. Next slide. So we now have three implementations in Chrome, Firefox, and in Safari it's behind a pref, but it's still encouraging to see that we have 3 working implementations for web platform tests. This also is a browser support courtesy of MDN here. So that's great to have. Next slide. So this is the remaining issue that we're trying to build a PR for. So basically, we all agree that we seem to want headers, but we wanted to have we have some questions about exactly what people mean. Do we want to allow web developers to add headers to the connect request? And having tried to integrate with fetch a little bit, I know that we have a connect request. We also have a connect stream that's sometimes called. And so while fetch integration gives us header support, it's still unclear to me whether something from the IETF or if this is we're just talking about headers that already exist in fetch. So the first question here, so we have some code. We add some headers, foobar, we get a response, and we can enumerate those responses. Does that already work? Does fetch already give us that? Do we need to say something in our web transport establishment session code for that, like we did for protocols, or not? And also the question is, do we disallow the forbidden header names? I assume so, but that is also a question. And then finally, do we allow authentication headers? And if so, all the types, basic, digest, or bearer? And also, Will, you added this slide. Do you have any other comments?
No, we're already getting feedback on what type of auth we should support, but we might want to restrict that. The question we really want to ask from this group is the interaction. If we simply tie in with fetch, do we get headers? And will those headers arrive if they're authentication headers at the appropriate time, such that they could be used on the server side to authenticate the establishment and authenticate the end user and thereby protect the establishment of the connection.
Yeah, Martin Thompson. I think these are difficult questions, but they're probably not as difficult as you might think. So the first one, I think, do we allow forbidden headers is relatively straightforward. I think we're going to integrate with fetch and we should follow whatever fetch does. So I think this is primarily the sec dash stuff plus the list of things that are explicitly forbidden, like connection and whatnot. And I think those are relatively straightforward. We follow the fetch rules for those, and that's good. I think the same is true for the authentication headers, but the problem with that is that we run into the question of pre-flighting. So the reason that most of the other fetch modes have the need for pre-flighting is to prevent the ambient authority that is in cookies and these fields from being used to inadvertently trigger actions on servers that aren't prepared for that. And so I think this list probably also needs to include cookies. And then we have the whole credentialed or whatever the flag is on fetch that plays into all of that. And so I think this is not necessarily a question for us in this group so much as it is for the web security side of things, though. So I think the W3C group is competent to answer these questions, probably even more so than we are.
Okay, thank you. I guess we have an audience of network folks, so I thought it would be good to ask if there are specific needs that people are familiar with.
I think Victor's also in the queue.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think that basically this is the entirely question for some combination of W3C and WHATWG, because this is where those things are specified for HTTP, and we already had some conversations about all of that, and including whether we need free flight or not.
Hey, Marco Munisaga, speaking as an individual. Agreed, this is a W3C question, but I just want to leave a comment that it would be great if we allow the authentication headers to avoid everyone re-implementing authentication within WebTransport, as was done in WebSocket.
Great, thank you. That was good feedback.
Thank you, Yanivar. Let's go on to the hackathon results. I think we have a couple of few coming up.
Hello, wanted to present some hackathon results that we did over the last 2 days. From Safari's perspective, we have a prototype with the latest H2 and H3 drafts, and we tested the H3 version with Meta's TVS Baton server. We fixed a few bugs, and we have it working with flow control enabled. We don't have support for session pooling or reset stream. We haven't tested those yet, but this was the result for Meta's TVS Baton server. Last night, we also found another server from Cloudflare, which we tested with. We have session establishment and data transfer going on there, but we don't have the video stream playing. We need to figure out what those issues are.
From the Firefox side, as mentioned before, Firefox release is currently on draft 4. There's various efforts, IETF related, to get us to draft 14. Well, it's really implementing reset stream mat on the quick layer and then implementing flow control. I don't see us implementing pooling anytime soon, but that doesn't prevent us from supporting flow control. And then on the W3C side, there are various other things, probably way more work to be done from the Firefox side. In terms of interop, we also did the Metas Devious Baton, and we're able to connect on draft 14, even though, yeah, missing reset stream mat and no flow control. So really, we connected on draft 4. And then there's the testing side from Cloudflare, which does properly work on, in this case, draft 4, streaming video all the way. I think that's all from our end.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for your effort in getting interop going. And yeah, let's continue to figure out the issues, and please file issues as you continue to implement. Yeah.
All right, we're going to do a slight speed round through a bunch of different issues and hopefully get to where we need to be to close some things out. We have a new version of all 3 documents. Let's go through them one by one. I'm going to give a really quick summary just in case you weren't necessarily paying attention as to what's changed. And then anything that's left open, we'll talk about right here. The overview's pretty straightforward. We added a new operation for how we do the keying exporters. We have a new offset that you can put in abort send side. So W3C is using this to then let you say, I've committed this many bytes, make sure that those are reliably delivered, as opposed to, hey, I'm getting rid of the stream and you can let that data get there or not. And we also mentioned the server certificate hash stuff. So this is essentially making sure that we've got our common operations defined somewhere that we can reference that isn't H2 or H3 specific. We have one issue that's open, which I'm mostly looking for a thumbs up, thumbs down from the room for. There are some folks who opened an issue saying, hey, I have a use case where I'd like to let people open a unidirectional stream to me and have that be receive only. And what we said is there's kind of 2 ways to do this right now. You can either ask the peer to open a unidirectional stream, and that can happen via a separate bidirectional or unidirectional stream, or you can always just open a bidirectional stream and then immediately right close it. And at that point, it is now a unidirectional stream that is receive only in practice, even if not in name. Given that this is in the overview, I think we're saying that this is okay as a composition of those other operations. But if we wanted to, we could define a separate concept of a thing you can do with WebTransport is that. So I think the proposal from the editors here is to say this is already covered as a composition of things you can do in the overview. So if folks want to give a thumbs up, thumbs down in the room, in the chat, and on the list, I'm seeing a thumbs up. Cool, love it. This is mostly editorial, but just want to make sure nobody was going to be confused by the outcome there. Cool. Let's talk about H3. So we've changed our negotiation for H3 almost as many times as we've revved the document. That's created a certain amount of churn, though I thought we'd just take a moment to check in and see where we landed. Everything's pretty much the same, except only the server has to send enable connect protocol. So this is our moment to say, let's pencils down. We're all happy with this or we're not. Time to be in good shape. So the server sends settings enable connect protocol. You have to do that to have extended connect work. Both sides can send settings WTMax sessions that had come out. It's now back in because both sides need to be able to indicate support for having more than one session at a time. You need datagrams so that you can do datagrams. And then you need the max datagram frame size so you have quick datagrams, and you need the reset stream at transport parameter to say that you support reset stream at. If anybody doesn't do the required things, for example, if datagrams is not enabled, we have some new text in there that basically says, especially because some of these things can show up out of order, not only do you not allow new web transport, but you have to go back and say, anybody who had done anything, if you find out that they actually weren't configured to do it right, you have to close everything down and say, I'm done with you, go away, stop. You did not do this. Other updates here, some of the max streams and max data capsules are delivered in order on the control stream for the session. So they now are able to require that you can't go back on a promise that you had. And there's an error code for, hey, you've done goofed, don't do this wrong. So hopefully that makes it a little bit easier to avoid having an accidental whoopsie. And the peer will actually tell you that you did a whoopsie, which is a much easier way to find out than that something stalls out later. Similarly, in the last meeting, we had a whole lot of conversation about negotiating flow control, and we had a desire to be able to negotiate flow control even if you're not doing pooling, which is kind of handy that we're now looking at doing that. And so the way that we're saying you do that is either you say you support more than one session at a time, or if you send any indication that you support flow control with one of the flow control settings, that means you're saying, great, I'm willing to do it. And if both sides are willing to do it, then you're doing it. We also added some of the transport properties from the overview. That's mostly editorial. All right, we have some places we want some input. This is essentially every open issue that's left, so we're almost there. Let's get through each of these, and then as we interop, let's file any more that we think we need. This one, I think, Lucas, you have an action right now. Hopefully the guidance that we have here is enough to turn that into text. Essentially what we're saying is that there's a bunch of text in the H3 security considerations around DOS considerations, and there's some text mentioned in the issue about how we had some limitations that we applied to server push, where somebody else can essentially send you stuff without you having said, I want lots of it. I think we have the same limits here. And then there's a catch-all in there as well that basically says this is a place where people might be scary. Make sure you're limiting what you allow people to do with it.
Yep. Speaking with no hats, yeah, I opened this issue. I have the action item to resolve some stuff. I don't think it'll be surprising to anyone what the text will end up being, but that as maybe speaking to some browser people during the hackathon this weekend, it's maybe surprising what new interactions that they'll experience that maybe server vendors are used to, and just really calling that out and surfacing it up. Because we want people to use these interactions to do the cool stuff. Yeah, we'll see. But I expect to get that done sooner rather than later, and reviews on that would be welcome.
Wonderful. So let's keep an eye out for that. Thank you, Lucas.
Alan Findell from Meta. I don't know if this is a good time or not. We were just having a discussion before this meeting about browsers are sort of wondering what limits they should set for how many unidirectional streams the server can open or bidirectional streams the server can open. And since push is kind of dead animal, nobody really thinks about that either. So there seems to be some confusion between how many of these things might actually show up and the universal answer, which is 100. So I don't know, we should resolve that at some point.
Yeah, I think this is a fine time to talk about that. So essentially, if I can restate what I think you're saying, especially if you're in mock and you're somebody who's planning on sending like 1 unit of work per stream, you're very quickly going to burn through 100 of those. And you need to make sure that there's time to update to get more.
Just quickly, I was just checking the issue, and I'd kind of made a note to myself that whatever I come up with will probably apply to the H2 document as well. So although this is an issue on H3, I think it's the same thing effectively.
Same thing, yeah.
I got Victor as well. Victor, do you want to go?
Yeah, I was thinking about like there is also the other side to limits where we want to have some encouragement about what minimums application vendors can expect. Well, by application vendors, I mean web applications, because one thing I recently ran into with Mock is that if your initial stream windows are small, your application will suffer in a lot of ways because of the way Mock is set up.
So I think question for the group here is, do we think we should all agree on some set of recommended numbers? We clearly picked 100 for H2, and that has stuck with us for maybe longer than we'd like. Is this a place where we want to define different application profiles into a thing? I mean, that's a whole bunch of extra documents somewhere else. Is this where we all write it down on a wiki somewhere? Like, this is what I think I'm doing. What would be useful for people actually implementing things, and what do we think would be helpful to be able to provide as guidance to folks using this software?
I don't know if Victor's still in the queue, but I guess my question is like, these limits are designed mostly to protect the memory of the receiver, and maybe I don't understand the browser world, so maybe there's another function there, but to some degree, I wonder whether you just let the JavaScript application choose the limits that it wants, and if it happens to use too much memory, then you do whatever you would have done if JavaScript used too much memory doing something else. Kill the tab or whatever. Or maybe that's a poor experience and we really need to come up with some number, but I feel like whatever number we come up with, it will live with us much longer than we want and probably won't be good enough for somebody. No, it's just a thought.
Speaking again as an individual, to replay what Victor said in a different way, it's certainly a way to DOS your peer by not giving it enough credit to do anything. But I think it's distinct from the kind of DOS security considerations I was thinking of. Maybe we just need another issue just to collect some of those thoughts and opinions and give it a little bit of time. But I kind of agree that any number we come up with now is a bit like the Goldilocks problem. It's too big, it's too little for others. Will haunt us forever because it's this sticky point in a spec somewhere that folks who don't participate in this working group or come along and do from clean implementation will just latch onto that number because that's what we said. So yeah, we'll come to it. But
Alan, do you want to toss an issue in for that just to make sure? Give us a budget. Thank you. All right. I know Martin had some thoughts about this. So we have the WebTransport Max sessions frame. Now this is interesting. We've essentially said, do we need this? One of the things that makes this one complicated in a way that all of the other limits aren't are that it's much harder to agree on how many WebTransport sessions are open, especially in H3. And so one of the proposals that we could consider is saying, well, just send a connect request that opens a new session. And if the other side doesn't like that you've opened so many, they will say, no, you may not have another session. Today, we use that to signal pooling support. So like there's some complexity there. We'd either have to rename it, change it, decide that you can always pool and you just send your second connect request and they say no, and then you can't. Things like that. We don't need to piggyback on it to enable flow control necessarily because we have the other mechanism of just mentioning a different flow control setting to enable that. So I think the question here is, do we still need to allow you to signal the max sessions? I think the original intent there was that, say you had your ossified 100 streams that you were willing to use, you wanted to save some of them for HTTP traffic or other WebTransport sessions. And so you want to limit both the number of sessions and the number of streams on those sessions so you can control how much space the peer is allowed to take up kind of out of that global limit and make sure that you reserve some for non-WebTransport traffic. You can also do that just by rejecting incoming things. This is going to be a theme for the rest of the meeting, so this is a good one to start thinking about now. Are we going to require the peer to just try and find out that it didn't work, or are we going to send them a hint so that they know how much they should reasonably expect to work when they do try? And I think Christian came and went from the queue. I may have read that.
I went when you said that whatever you do will not change the fact that some people don't want to implement flow control.
Ah, gotcha. Thank you.
That's
I think you're in the queue next, Mark.
There was anything more coming. Yeah, so I find the whole question about flow control interesting here, but I think your point about the flow control settings and decoupling the flow control settings from this is a good one. I'm firmly of the view that you should implement the flow control thing. You've just implemented an entire quick stack and an HTTP stack and an entire web transport stack, and you're quibbling over that. Seems a little bit weak to me. And so that I have no sympathy for that argument at all. I think the primary concern I have with this is what happens when you do hit the limit at the server. So the server says, I have an internal limit, and if we don't have this setting, we need to have some sort of story for that. And I think there may be a case for doing this in HTTP as well anyway, which is make a new connection for this request, some form of way of indicating that would be a sensible thing to do. We have the, what's it at 421, which is the 1.1 required thing, which I think is the wrong fit for this sort of thing, but it would be hilarious to get a 1.1 required in response to a web transport request. Makes no sense. Well, it would mean something, but it would not mean that the web transport is going to be successful, I think is pretty much guaranteed at that point. But I'm of the view that we should remove this setting and let it go. But we do need to solve that one problem. Well, maybe we need to solve that one problem is what do we do in the situation where a client wants to make a request and the server has run out of capacity for sessions. Because sessions are more expensive than requests, and I would imagine that servers may have a lower limit than they would have for their sort of stream concurrency limit, particularly when the stream concurrency limit is also tied into all of this mess. So having a solution for that would be good. My suggestion would be to look at a new status code for that purpose, which is IRC, but I think it's probably the most elegant solution to that problem that I can think of right now. Obviously, I'm open to suggestions for alternatives, but I think that's my preference here.
So to make sure I caught that, there's part one is it's okay to just try and not have a hint ahead of time that it's not going to work. And two, when it doesn't work, today we don't give you a way to say, I'm not accepting this because I hate you and this isn't available with this resource, versus I'm not accepting this because I would love to talk to you about it, but you've already reached your limit. And so you're saying it's okay to just try. And then part two is we need a separate way to indicate, I would love to talk to you about this, but you've reached your limit, as opposed to please go away and don't talk to me about this.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so I realized that we don't do a similar limiting thing when it comes to connect or extended connect generally. So there's no limit on the number of WebSockets. And actually, I think it would be very reasonable to have a limit on the number of WebSockets that's independent of things. WebSockets are annoying and expensive.
Doesn't that just mean it costs you around to find out what that limit is?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's okay, I think, for these sorts of things. I don't know that there's a lot of cases where the latency of web transport setup is so performance critical that you would want that. I mean, you want the happy path to be fast, but I think the unhappy path, I would be okay spending round trips on that.
Got it. Thank you.
Alan Frindell. I guess I'm not understanding why, if the server is going to have a limit, or it definitely does. So what is the harm of telling the peer what it is instead of, I have a limit and you just have to guess. And if you happen to exceed it, like, I didn't even tell you what the limit was. I just told you you're over it. It seems very low effort to just be like, I'm a server and my limit is blah. It can, and if you want, just, you can say that if you don't send this setting, then it defaults to the number of whatever. I mean, it doesn't seem that hard. It seems like burning an RTT and minting a new error code are worse outcomes to solve that problem to me.
Lucas, speaking as an individual, I don't particularly like the idea of defining new status codes. There is a 429, which is too many requests, which could maybe fit. It's more about rate limiting, too many requests per connection, maybe also per client, and rather than a single connection. But there's like work going on in the HTTP API working group about setting problem types on that response, which could maybe be kind of bodged to fit this kind of interaction model without all of the overhead of a new status code. It's just something to consider.
Mike Bishop, also as an individual. It's funny you should mention the rate limiting stuff. So you're talking about the round trip to discover the limit, and it occurs to me that if the limit is 0, you're doomed. So you don't care that you burned a round trip. If the limit is greater than 1, then you don't need the round trip to find out the limit initially. You just do like the rate limit API, similar to the rate limit API coming out of HTTP API, and say, my limit is 30 and you've used 1 so far. Just put it on the response, it worked, and now I know I have 29 left. And that also helps you with the synchronization of how many sessions are open? Well, the server thinks it's 1.
Yeah, I like that, because that is, I think that, so essentially you're saying when I send the connect request, you reply by saying the rate limiting stuff. So you essentially say, hey, and by the way, you're currently at X amount out of your total quota. I think the ordering was the only interesting challenge there, but if that gives you your most recent ordering, then maybe that's easily spellable. Victor.
Oh, well, there are many problems with this. The first problem is that if you just delete this parameter, the protocol will not work. And the reason for that is you don't know if the peer supports WebTransport and the WebTransport extensions to H3 syntax.
I thought we were saying that a lot of that was tied to the upgrade token.
It cannot be tied to the upgrade token because upgrade token is what's it called? It's request level, but the changes we make are connection level, like ability of.
Oh yes, you would have to have done that before you could send anything else.
Yeah,
or we piggyback on any of the other settings, but yeah.
Yeah, that's why we still need that, and we had a long discussion about why we need it from both sides versus one, but we effectively would revert to like draft 02 where we had settings enable WebTransport. But I personally agree with people who said that this is generally useful. I especially find the tri-state flow control negotiation thing useful.
Corey Benfield, Apple. I think there's nothing wrong with having the extra data. I do think the flow control settings is interesting, but it can only be advisory. The server is always going to be entitled to change its mind about what its limits are dynamically and not tell you. Yeah. So we still have to solve the problem of how do we communicate to the client that is what happened and that it shouldn't just start trying to reconnect again.
Today, I think we say if you rejected, the client doesn't know that could be because you changed your mind. And so you're probably not supposed to just try again. And if you're a server who's having a hard day, having all the clients you tell to go away just come back harder isn't necessarily a win.
Yeah. So I don't like the this is nice because it makes my implementation easier argument on the tri-state thing. I think the tri-state thing is an abomination because it means that 0 means one thing, 1 means a different thing, and 2 means a different thing, and 3 means the same as 2, and it's weird. Corey's point, I think, convinced me that advertising this in settings doesn't really help. But the rate limit thing, I found quite appealing. The knowing that the thing that you're going to talk to speaks WebTransport is something that we kind of already have, in that someone gave you a URI and told you to connect to it on WebTransport. That's a pretty good signal. And I think that's probably the strongest signal that we have.
Can I answer that?
Please.
That is not a good signal because it is possible that they sent you and you have an existing connection, but that existing and what would happen if you attempt to open WebTransport, the server will close all of your HTTP pending requests with a protocol error.
Why would it do that?
Because you are attempting to speak WebTransport to a server that does not speak WebTransport.
Because you sent a format that it can't parse.
So the web server supports the extended connect before you even make the attempt, right? So
yeah, because it supports WebSockets.
Because it supports all of the other things, maybe. And you make the request and it says no. and so you don't get web transport. That happens all the time. Someone gives you a URI and it doesn't go anywhere because of 404.
So
yeah, but you can open data streams concurrently with Connect.
And then they get reordered, and then that shows up before the connect.
And it shows up before the connect, and that's going to do what?
That's going to result in you saying, I got a
those
what,
connection,
a
those
preamble on a stream that I don't know what to do with,
those,
basically.
Those streams are going to get killed. That's the answer there. That's okay.
Which is also what happens when they reply negatively to your connect, is those streams should also get killed because they rejected you.
Yeah, the suggestion from Victor there is that they're going to look like not HTTP streams,
right?
And that server's going to choke.
It might kill more than just that stream.
Yeah, there are some. Yeah, also remember we have some assumptions, even like in our analysis, of course, that WebTransport is explicitly opt-in.
Right. Good point. So we need something to make that possible.
And in the past, we just had a settings enable web transport.
That's not bad.
That wasn't a number. And then we could combine, I'm all for this merry-go-round. So we can
right back again.
Oh, geez. So we could go back to just a Boolean of this is enabled, and the number we would say is truly a hint, whereas the other settings are actually enforced limits that you must not break.
The alternative is to do away with the performance optimization as well, because it is just a performance optimization for the creation of streams.
That is an extra round trip on the happy path, though.
Only for the streams, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I wasn't opening WebTransport because I didn't want to stream, but yes. Okay. Alan, I know a minute ago you were talking about it would be useful to have the hint and stuff like that. If I could coerce you into coming back to the mic, would you be happy with something where the 200 coming back from the server on the connect request was like, and by the way, I think you've used 5 out of your 30, and that's just a hint, and I might at any time decide to reject you even if you're at 25?
Yeah, I think the accommodate, like the merry-go-round makes me sad because we've been coming to these rooms for a long time. But if we end up with the design that we're happy with and we don't change it again, I can live with a Boolean and a header that tells you one of some dynamic limit. It seems totally reasonable to me. Yeah.
The other reason that enable seems attractive as opposed to max sessions is every single person so far that I've talked to who has read the draft for the first time has said, so why again is the client saying that it supports more things than ever made sense that a client has no control over? Because a client saying, I allow you to open 3 web transport sessions to me is non-actually sensical.
Okay, so the proposal is the server sends the setting, the client does not send. The client sends the flow control settings if it wants to flow control, and it opens multiple sessions if it can or want. Yeah, okay.
I think so.
That's what the proposal is.
We can work out the spelling if the client needs to send anything at all, versus if the client also needs to say enable web transport. But I think the goal is server sends enable web transport. We can do rate limiting stuff. If you allow pooling or not, you basically hint that when you open the first session, you say, great, you just used your 1 of 1. That's what you get. And if you ever say you're going to do more than that, you're good to go. Does that mean that you now have to do flow control?
You always have to.
Any other thoughts on if that sounds good or not? This is one of the biggest things that we need to get sorted out. So this is a good use of time to get to the bottom of and not go around again in future meetings.
Are you still in the queue, Martin? Sorry. No? Okay. I think we have Christian.
Yeah, I understand Martin's point that basically you have to be that tall to participate, and you have already implemented the full quick stack, so you shall be able to implement whatever we say. But flow control on top of flow control is a real mess. And if you must do it, yes, but if you can avoid it, you really want to. Because, I mean, if I had to implement flow control on the server side, that means that I have to somehow invent a way to translate whatever the quick setting is into a setting at the web transport level, and then I have to send a way to multiplex that if I have multiple sessions. And yeah, I mean, yeah, if you are tall enough, you can certainly do enough code and make it work. But I also want my server to run on an Arduino class device, and that's not going to be helpful. So I really like the simple way of saying, no, just defer to Quick.
It might be worth noting that we didn't add any redundant layers. And I think there's a section in there that talks about that. So if we did, then an issue would be lovely. But my understanding is, like, for example, on a particular WebTransport stream in H3, Quick already has a flow control limit for how much data can be sent on that stream, and WebTransport over H3 does not. So it defers to the lower layers anywhere that there would be redundantly nested layers like that.
Yeah, I mean, and if you can do that, the question is, if you have one session, it's obviously to defer. If you want to have multiple sessions for some reason, then you have to choose whether you want to defer or you want to build a cathedral on top of a cathedral. And I would rather not, please.
I'm not totally sure I'm following the extra layers for multiple sessions, other than the fact that if you have multiple sessions, you need to then be able to control them. That is no longer redundant with Quick, and so yes, you do have a layer there. I think what we'd be saying is that you, as a server, you must not accept an incoming connect request for more than one unless you've either sent the flow control settings or we pick some other way that we want you to indicate that you're doing the thing. Would that be a reasonable requirement? So as long as you never breathe a word that you knew about it, you are promising that you will only ever accept one at a time. And in your rate limit header, you should say you are using your one of one, and we're still in the same state we are today. Does that work?
Yeah, that would work. That would absolutely work. But I'd like that to be blessed, not just something that we might do and change later.
Yeah, so I'm thinking we essentially have a sentence that says you must not accept more than one incoming connect request unless you have sent the flow control settings, and otherwise we blow up on you.
Okay.
Cool.
Yep, that works.
Thank you. All right, now onto something completely different, but also fun. We have talked in the past about running the thing that is currently called WebTransport over H2, but is indeed a thing that works on any bidirectional byte stream for WebTransport over a single H3 stream. And what we had said is that we do this for two reasons. One, it reduces the negotiation complexity. So I don't have to figure out if new WebTransport streams are new H3 streams or not. And two, it gives the quotes best benefits for each hop. So for example, when I'm in WebTransport and I send a datagram, I can be assured that as long as it's going over H3, that datagram is in fact truly unreliable. And that works really well when I am a client and I'm talking to a server. The moment that there are more than one hop between me and the origin that I'm ultimately trying to talk to, that becomes a little bit more interesting, because you might have an H2 leg somewhere upstream of you, and the fact that you think your datagrams are unreliable does not mean that somebody else isn't going way out of their way to make sure that they absolutely do get there, and that they get very upset if they don't get there. We're going to talk in a minute about some of the upgrade token stuff, but we, in the previous meeting, agreed that we were going to have separate upgrade tokens for the WebTransport that runs over a stream, which is WebTransport over H2, and the specific mapping that explodes those streams out so that you have each stream as a separate H3 stream and datagrams are actually H3 datagrams. So we've already solved the negotiation complexity part, and this is our kind of last chance to revisit. Do we still want to require that you split it out? Do we want to say, hey, if I'm actually running this and I'm a proxy and I have a hop that's going to be using H2, it would be much easier for me to be able to just kind of pass things through directly without having to translate between the two, especially if my upstream leg is talking H3, but that's not providing any benefits to the client for having been split out. So the question here is, do we keep the requirement that you split out to H3, or do we say, you know what, you can negotiate them separately, and so you can just ask for what you want, and if you don't care, you just ask for general WebTransport. If you do care, then great, you should ask for the specific WebTransport over H3 because you know you're talking H3 and you know you care.
I'm not totally sure I understand what your question is, but let me see if are you saying that as a client, I can say like, I really want to do the stream web transport, or I want to do the regardless of what kind of HTTP connection there's actually here, I want to do a web transport over H2 style.
You're never going to connect over H2 and be like, I would like unreliable datagrams by asking for web
The
transport
question is
over
really the
H3.
other way around.
Yes, the question is the other way around. So if I make an H3 connection to you, you being the server, I am the client, I can either request in my extended connect request, I can use the upgrade token for web transport over H3, which says, I want my datagrams to be unreliable. Please explode them out into actual HTTP datagrams. Or technically, today we essentially forbid you from asking for the other upgrade token that is just the web transport over H2 run it on a single stream. And what we could choose to do instead is say, now that we have the ability to ask for either, we'd previously said you must always use the one that breaks it out because we can't negotiate. So we just have to pick one. Now that you have the ability to ask for either, I can ask you for web transport -H3, and you say, great, I'm willing to break these out, and I have separate H3 streams for every stream. Or I can just say, give me generic web transport that runs on a stream. And if I ask for that as a client, you could give it to me and it would be fine.
So there's sort of I want streams, or I don't care.
Right.
Or I guess you can also say I don't want. So you're saying
there's I don't care. I don't need my datagrams to be unreliable. You're already going to go through multiple hops that don't have this. Like, it's fine. It's going to be a lot easier for your infrastructure to do that. And if you're writing a web page that knows your infrastructure does that, then you don't need to go to all the extra effort, and your intermediary becomes much easier.
Okay, so first of all, I wonder if we change this, is this an API question that needs to be considered by W3C? But generally, I'm in support. We have a system that's not dissimilar from WebTransport that we would like to move to WebTransport, and it has this capability, which is like and they do it for various reasons, but they're just like, they call them stream groups or whatever, but they're like, you can open a stream group that says like, I want to contain it to one HTTP stream, or I want to open a stream group that spreads out. And they allow both. And so I think in order to migrate that system here, which is what I want to do, I would want this capability. And then are there requirements about how that traverses intermediaries? Because I can see if I got H2 downstream and then H3 is available upstream, then what do I do?
Well, that's the thing. If H3 is available upstream, that doesn't necessarily actually provide you any benefit from the client.
It depends on how, it depends which one's the lossy link. I don't know.
Right. So that's true. Maybe it is.
So I don't know how exactly you would do that, because if
right. Essentially what we're saying is we're no longer going to take that choice away from you. We would let you choose. So your intermediary could choose to request upstream and say, I'm going to request the H3 specific version. Or it just says, I just request the generic.
I guess that would be
version.
an argument for the flip side, which is that I can ask for the H3 version on an H2 connection, and it downgrades to H2, but preserves the upgrade token to the other side in case H3 was available there. I don't know.
I don't know if we need to go that far, but we can talk about that one. I think the key that I'm looking for right now is we previously said we had this hard requirement because otherwise we didn't know how to negotiate which one you use. We now have a very easy answer for negotiating which one we use. Is there anybody who is deeply offended by the idea that you would have a single H3 stream that contains your entire web transport session? Victor.
I just wanted to say that I think I might have been one of the people who asked for this, or definitely one of the people who intended to do this in production, because sometimes when you're inside data center, or like you're trying to push your web transport in other contexts, it's very convenient to just turn it into a stream and then forget about it, because all of your like downstream routing stack supports streams and they don't support web transport shaped things, but you don't care because you're inside data center and it already works anyways.
Right. Okay. Cool. I think that's we'll put up a PR that essentially removes the restriction. Alan, if you could help us figure out how to spell the other half of what you were saying, we can see if that's a useful addition, but I think yes, I think we should chat about that next week, and see if we need API changes for that. Right now, you essentially have the ability to say, I require H3. We might have a prefer, and we can sort out the spelling for that. All right, we put all the fun issues up front, so we're going to do a speed round through all the rest of them. I know we went back and forth on this a little bit. We were saying the general web transport that we were just talking about would be the web transport, works anywhere, and then the H3 specific version of web transport is WebTransport H3. Victor, I see you're both still in the queue and maybe coming back to the queue. There you are.
Yeah, I think I would actually, like, my personal opinion is like we should either do other way, because we use WebTransport for WebTransport over H3 right now.
Yeah, for me, we did WebTransport over H3 first, so emotionally, it's kind of the thing I think of as primary. But from a layering perspective, there's one that kind of works everywhere, and then there's one that's a very specific mapping. So we can take that back to the issue as well, because I know we're low on time. All right, H2 had a bunch of changes. We're going to speed round through a bunch of these. We updated some transport properties. We did some behaviors around how you close things. We did some math for you in the document so you don't have to do it yourself. We removed settings WT max sessions entirely. This mirrors a lot of the discussion that we were having earlier, so that aligns very nicely. We've said that if you do get a WebTransport init header that's invalid, you have to reject the session. We should talk about if we want to keep the header. And we added some of the key exporters. The clicker just that slow. Okay, cool. We removed max sessions here. I think we already talked about all this in the context of H3. We'll do the same thing for H2. Very quick question. This is mostly a thumbs up, thumbs down. We have an initial max stream data BiDi setting. Quick has BiDi local and BiDi remote. Does that apply here? Do we want that here? Kind of seems like we do. I'm seeing at least one thumbs up, 2 thumbs up. Can we make it 3? Nice. All right, cool. And last but not least, settings updates in H2. You can update settings. We've said essentially that the initial limits for all of these things are initial limits. So new sessions created with them get those limits. Sessions that already existed don't. They were created in the past. If the values are reduced, you're essentially required to track the latest acknowledged values in settings. And so that's where you are basically waiting to see if the setting is act when you apply it. And in this case, the question is, would we want to, would you want to have the settings act be the thing that you track, or we could simplify a little bit and just say, you must never reduce these values, at which point you don't have to care. But I think the canonical way to do this is to say the latest acknowledged values are what show up. It's already an ordered protocol. The only difference is that the client may have sent something before you sent the settings. That's not new.
Yeah, so HTTP2 has a very clear model for this, and that is that when you make a request, the settings are known at the time that request is made, and you use those. And so you would copy these values into the session that you create at that time. Perfect. So don't mess with that formula, or you will end up messing with a lot of things.
We do have also the formula of you cannot necessarily reduce some of these values for places where you signal support for something. You can't then go back and say, just kidding, I don't support it. So we could copy that formula, but I think this match is better as the just like use whatever the latest value is. When a new session comes in, you take whatever you think the latest acknowledged values are and you slap them into the session, and you're like, that's your deal.
That you have to do it that way in this case. I don't see any other way making sense, and not being able to reduce these it's not necessary to have that constraint. There are other places where we can't change settings, but those are weird, and this is not weird.
Yeah. Thank you. That's the end of the queue, and that is for you.
Cool. So I'll do some wrap up here. Thanks everyone for your engagement, and Eric for kind of rattling through those last few things. We clearly have, I think, in the last meeting, sorry to go back a little bit, we indicated that we're still waiting for some implementation, and we might have used a working group last call between the last meeting and this meeting to force a review and maybe push some implementation, that we've got a good baseline. We didn't do the working group last call, but we did get some implementation, which is great. Nidia and I have discussed it a bit. What we're seeing is there's a few more issues that have come up. There's people who are assigned those issues. We've got pen holders. So I expect that we'll see some proposals come up, and we'd welcome everyone in this meeting or who couldn't attend the meeting to review those things. But once we close out the remaining few issues and all of the drafts, that will be at a stage where we would be comfortable calling working group last call. So between now and the next meeting, that's kind of our rough plan. Obviously, things can change, but that would be our indication.
Just for my benefit, because I was involved in the conversation, but I don't know how it concluded. How did we resolve the HTTP3 max sessions setting discussion? Just now, like what was the answer to that one? Because I missed it and I would like a summary.
Did we resolve it?
So I believe the summary was that we are going to put up a PR that removes the setting, changes to the server sends a settings WT enabled, and if you want other hints about how many sessions the server is likely to let you open, you can send that in rate limiting headers. And we still do have an open question about whether or not we need some other way to signal, hey, you've gone too far, please come back in a different connection or later.
I'm seeing shrugs, but no complaints. Yeah, Eric's description matches my recollection.
So I just want this on the record. It's more important that we resolve the situation than we resolve it in a particular way. So I encourage people to take that same attitude with respect to this. I would rather see this go to working group last call in the next few weeks than continue to argue about the exact way it's spelled.
Okay, thanks. I'll take that on board. So yeah, we're at time. Thanks you all. Thank you for the note takers. And yeah, let's go grab some lunch. What did we say we were talking about? Sorry. About working group. That's cool stuff. Cool. Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry. Where is he? I can't see him. Let's go grab him quickly.
You can't report it. What's the point?
Of living.
KWIK.
Oh. Yeah, and the name is.
Oh, well. You already signed. I love it. Was it offensive when it was introduced? Yes. Years ago? Yeah. I did. It was like, just do it. Get it done. It would have been out. I mean, just what's the deal? These people are actually building it. We were improving compared to 4 months ago. We had some disruptions. There it is. Ta-da. Perfect. Yeah,